Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the talk on Gender Matters, organized together by the Oñati community and the Oñati Institute for the Sociology of Law. The International Institute for the Sociology of Law attracts early stage and well-established academics around the world, they work on different topics such as gender studies, legal professions, transitional justice, indigenous peoples, transnational law, globalization. The list goes on. This time, we are bringing together researchers working on gender matters because gender matters. The timing of this webinar is excellent because the students of this year's masters are currently following the course on law and gender. As most of you already know, the Oñati community is a project of the International Institute for the Sociology of Law. This project brings together alumni, faculty, and friends of the institute and wish to be connected and networked for all kinds of academic success initiatives and social activities such as joint projects, social parallel gatherings around academic events, organizing future events, webinars, etc. We are, of course, very happy to support them. So, this webinar will have a first part of 40 minutes with the presentations, and we have allocated 20 minutes for the Q&A. Those who have joined us online, please write any comments or questions in the chat, and we will facilitate them to the speakers. And those who are in the classroom, you can ask your questions directly to the presenters. We also would like to say thank you to all of you for joining us, and especially the scientific director of the International Institute for the Sociology of Law, Sabine Frerich, for attending this webinar, and of course, the presenters and Victoria Capriles, who will be our main moderator for today. So Victoria Capriles is a lawyer. She is also an alumni from the International Institute of Sociology of Law Masters. She also has a master's degree in political and government studies. And currently, she's studying for a PhD in political science at the Universidad Simón Bolívar. On top of that, she is also a professor in the Department of International Studies at UNIMED and the Deputy Director of the Human Rights Center at the same university. It is also relevant for the topic of today to tell that she's working on the Venezuelan migrant and refugee crisis and how Venezuelan women are affected differently because of gender stereotypes, being vulnerable to xenophobia and sexual exploitation. Thank you very much, Victoria, for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much to everybody that is here in person or online. As Nisha was telling you, I'm going to be the main moderator of the event, but we are going to be listening to Claudia Blandón, Telmira Mura, Nicoleta Pricrameneu, and Barbara Bello, that they will be the main presenters today. They will speak in this order, each of them was telling us about their research on gender issues. And then we are going to have 20 minutes questions and answers and comments. So if somebody is online, you can put your comments and questions in the chat, and the people in person can do them when the time comes. So we have first Claudia to speak to us. Thank you so much, Claudia.
Thank you very much for being here. Just give me 1 second, I'll share my presentation. All right, so thank you again and welcome to everybody. The title of my presentation is The Praxis of Human Rights, Deconstructing Legal Norms and Human Rights Knowledge from the Ground Up. This is based on my doctoral research, so any comments or feedback that you may have, I'll be very grateful for it at the end of the session. So before I start telling you why I got into ideas of empowerment and what it means on the ground, I want to tell you how it started. And it was, I was living in Niger, West Africa, and I was reading a report that claimed that a water pump that was installed in a village nearby had a positive impact on women's lives, and therefore it translated into empowerment. The thing was that the sentence that really got my attention, it was claiming that it saved women's time. And based on my experience living in that community at that time, I knew that their conception of time was completely different to ours. And so it made me think that women were never consulted and that they were claiming this impact through Western eyes. And this didn't stop there. As I moved for work, for other contexts, this pattern kept happening. This idea of empowering the vulnerable, especially women, especially in certain contexts. So I kept thinking, what does empowerment mean, really? Empowerment for what? Empowerment for whom? How? So I took this question to my native Colombia, which is a very interesting case study for this inquiry for several reasons. Sadly, Colombia has a long history of violence, and therefore we have a high IDP population, as in internally displaced people. And just as a footnote, an internally displaced person, or IDP, is different from a refugee because an IDP has not crossed an international border and therefore is under the protection of their own government, even if the government is the cause of their displacement. Whereas a refugee has crossed an international border and is under the protection of the international community or international law. But going back to Colombia, because of this long history of violence and displacement, the country also has a very strong judicial response to protect IDPs, at least on paper. And because I'm interested in the lives of women and how they experience law on the ground, Colombia also shows a lack of understanding about what women's rights mean on the ground and in practice. So my research, overarching research question is quite simple. I wanted to ask women, or I wanted to explore the role that human rights education play in shaping these notions of empowerment. I also asked the women about their perceptions of empowerment and vulnerability beyond these legal and human rights discourses. In terms of methods and methodology, this is a qualitative empirical research, which is, there's a gap for this in legal scholarship. It is an interdisciplinary study between education and forced migration studies. I'm using a feminist lens to look at this data. And I'm drawing today on 12 interviews with women in Colombia who have experienced displacement and who are themselves human rights educators. And I'm also using document analysis of a specific legal instrument. So the first step was to look at what are the sources of empowerment? How are women teaching to be empowered? So according to the UN, human rights education aims to empower people or learners to promote a universal culture of human rights, so they can learn to prevent the violations, to claim their rights. The bottom line is that they become agents of change. The second source that I looked at was the guiding principles on internal displacement. And they are just guiding principles, they're not binding. And the hope is that governments will adopt these principles into their domestic law so they can protect IDPs. And they basically outline the protection and rights that IDPs have in the 3 phases of displacement: before, or to prevent displacement, during, or to help them resettle. But Law 1257 from 2008 came from the women themselves, the women that I interviewed. They were the ones who told me that this instrument was important to them on the ground. And this is a very significant law for women because it deals with all sorts of violence of all women, not only displaced women, in discrimination. But for me, the highlights were that it has a very comprehensive definition of violence. It defines women's rights as human rights. It talks about a principle of co-responsibility, meaning that everybody is responsible to prevent violence. And it increases the criminal punishment for feminicide, for example. So taking all this into account and looking at a recent report from the from a UN High Panel on Displacement that said that one of the problems that IDPs had is that they fall into neglect because nobody pays attention to them and they fall into invisibility and obscurity. So what I wanted to share with you today is two emerging themes from my own research on how my participants are addressing this neglect and obscurities and how they are dealing with the challenges that come with engaging with laws and the processes that are there to help them. The first theme is how their work, how through their work, they are making visible hidden sources of violence, disempowerment, and discrimination while engaging with legal processes. I want to read two quotes, so bear with me, and then I'll tell you why this is significant for this context. These human rights defenders told me that it's not pleasant to be called a victim. After a while, people start thinking that you are just trying to claim too many benefits. And the second quote is from a human rights educator. She was describing to me a very awful confrontation that happened during one of her workshops. She said that the confrontation happened between a trans woman and two peasant women. One peasant woman was furiously protesting when a trans woman wanted a breast implant as reparation for a sexual crime that she was a victim of. The peasant woman said that she had been denied breast implants after having a mastectomy because of breast cancer. She told that she did not qualify for this treatment because she was too old to give birth and breastfeed eventually. The other woman said that she was also struggling to get a hormonal treatment to manage the menopause. They both found unfair that the trans woman might receive privileged treatment before them. So these two quotes represent an emerging theme where women felt that even when engaging with legal instruments designed to protect them and support them, they still felt victimized and vulnerable. And this is problematic because in the Colombian context, displacement can be intergenerational and multiple. And therefore, people are left feeling victimized for longer under the illusion of accessing justice and seeking empowerment. The second theme that is emerging is how women are working from the bottom up to trigger that cultural shift that is needed to make laws effective. One human rights defender said, yes, Law 1257 sounds very beautiful, very strong, but it does not work on the ground. I went to the police station with a friend to denounce a crime, and they told her to forget about it and go fix that with the perpetrator under the blankets. The other woman talked about working in collaboration with the international community and organization and her reluctance to do so because she felt that they just told her what to do based on the needs that they had identified, not their own needs. So what this shows is that women are taking into their own hands this cultural shift that is needed to make the law to have a real impact and effectiveness. Women are working to trigger that shift with education and using methodologies in order to appropriate the law. So to conclude, these few voices matter because they are shining light on internal displacement and the role of gender when accessing justice. And there are 3 points that I want to make when I'm closing, and it's that I found that the binary empowerment vulnerability is problematic, that empowerment is temporal, spatial, and intertwined with vulnerability. Second, that it's paramount to identify and acknowledge and work with indigenous notion of empowerment. People are not empty vessels. And third, the human rights education programs are opening up spaces, not only to transmit this human rights discourse, but to find this and revitalize knowledge that exists that empowers women. So to finalize, I want to leave you with one thought. And you know that legal scholars recognize that law works with categories that in fact might be useless for people on the ground. With this research, my intention is to show the importance of theorizing from the ground up, because I do agree with Lorde when she says that if we don't define ourselves for ourselves, we will be defined by others for their own, for their use and our detriments. So Women in Mind research know that empowerment and vulnerability are intimately intertwined and full of processes. Like one of my participants said beautifully, the more empowered I become, the more vulnerable I feel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia. We know it's difficult to summarize your research in such a little time, so thank you so much. And our next speaker will be Telmila, so go ahead. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I will share my presentation in PowerPoint. Just a minute. Somewhere here. It's here, but it's can you just make it small? Yes, but not in full screen. Maybe like this. Oh, oops. Aha. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the presence, for the students. I'm so glad to share this speech with the strong results, the strong women, Nicoleta, Victoria, Claudia, especially Barbara, because she's my supervisor in my stay in the institute. My presentation, I'm from Brazil. I'm a student of PhD in sociology of law, sociology of state, law and justice of Faculty of Economy and Centro de Estudos Sociais of University of Coimbra. I am bachelor and master in law by the Faculty of Law and the University of São Paulo. And I'm a lawyer in family law, almost 20 years in São Paulo. Then I'm a lawyer in my own office, in private cases, in a organization that provides free legal assistance to needy population by the students of the Faculty of Law of the University of São Paulo. The subject of my research is the role of the advocacy in disputes about parental responsibilities, its influence on the choice of custody regime in the city of São Paulo. Then I prepare a single fast context about the legislation of gender custody in Brazil. The law of 1962, the Statute of Married Women, that instituted more laws, more rights to the woman, as your independence by the husband to sign contracts, to work, to your own job, for example. In 1977, the law, the Act of Divorce, that instituted the unilateral custody, and years, one decade after the constitutional, the 1988, that instituted the formal gender equality, the law, the 2008, instituted the joint custody as a faculty to in the divorce, and the law of 2014 instituted the joint custody as a rule. Then, in this context, despite the fact that the Act of 2014 instituted the joint custody as a rule regime for the coexistence between parents and children after divorce, there is a resistance from the Jews in establishing such a regime or determining it as it were the attribution of unilateral effect, since the child's domicile is fixed at the mother's house and the father's visits must only take place on alternative weekends, or by the fact, the unilateral custody. This regime of unilateral custody in favor of the mother, or shared custody through which the child spends most of time with the mother, tends to reproduce the role of gender, that the mother has greater responsibilities for the children than the fathers, even if the woman is inserted in the labor market and has her professional and or academic career with the same workload as men. Such a scenario, tends to overload the woman with obligations, compromising their mental health, the possibility of developing their careers, influencing the idea of children that the duty of care for children is predominantly women's, a behavior that tends to be reproduced by the new generations, therefore. However, the mentioned implementation by the Brazilian courts is not the direct object of this study. From this observation in this forums day by day, the interest in studying this legal point of view of the division of parental responsibilities, especially on the application of the Joint Custody Institute. However, the majority practice in society still shows that the role of the mother is one of greater care and responsibility for the children than that of the father in the Brazilian reality. No, I don't know in other countries like North Europe, for example, but this is the reality of Brazil, and I think in the Latin America. According to tradition, that has existed for the centuries, and that has only changed in the last decades of the 20th century, the last century. From the forensic practice as a family law lawyer, this research, I interested in studying the certain reluctance of the judiciary to establish and even encouraging to adoption of joint custody in its abroad concept of equal division of responsibilities over the children, and that they live for periods of equal duration in the mother's and father's house, taking into account the pattern of the heterosexual couple. The major part of cases of litigations. However, such a trend may come from the very demands that reach the judiciary precisely by the signature of the initial litigation petitions or the request for ratification of the agreement at the moment in which they guide the parties. Lawyers, these are the ones responsible for the first link of connection between former couples in conflict over child custody in the judiciary. In order to make it possible to analyze access to justice through guidelines and the encouragement or not of advocacy regarding the choice of child custody, that is, promoting the co-division of parental responsibilities. Therefore, this research intends to verify the influence of advocacy in the guidance of the choice of parents regarding child custody in demands that deal with the division of parental responsibilities. I stay in the initial part of my research. I'm staying the project of the thesis, and the great questions. Why do the judges and the courts play gender roles? But in synthesis, but who are the first agents to advise on the rights of spouses and children? In a city with wide social inequality, is there a difference in the setting of custody according to the family's address? This point is because, two images. This is São Paulo. No, maybe the principal image for the people of the city, but the major part of population stayed in this part, the peripheric area. In São Paulo, have 14 courts of justice with courts of family, and a difference of quality of life, for example, the age, the expectancy of age of 84 years in Alto de Pinheiros, and 71 years in São Miguel Paulista, different areas of city. Of course, São Miguel Paulista is a perfect area, and Alto de Pinheiros is a central area. Is this? I know the joint custody may be not a perfect form to resolve the inequalities of gender, but I think that can be a way to more equality. Thank you very much for audience.
Thank you so much, Danila. And now we will have Nicoleta to present her research.
Yes, I think it's working. Yes, perfect. Okay, so I will try to look at the screen for the people online and look here for the people who are in the room. First of all, thank you very much for including intersex in this. Unfortunately, even in gender studies or even in the LGBT movement, intersex is still invisible and it's not included. It's not included in curricula, it's not included in the faculties, it's not included in the discourse in general. And this is why there is this quote saying that the I in the LGBTI, it's not for invisible, but for intersex. So in my presentation, which will be consist of 2 parts, I will try to share my experience since I'm both in academia and activism. So I will share some of the results of my study. It was actually my PhD that was finished in 2019 and was published the same year. Of course, since 2019, other reports and texts have been published, so you can search online for more information on intersex if you want. And then I will also share my experience as an activist and actually my engagement in the lawmaking, in the law that was recently passed in Greece on intersex. So I will first start with what is intersex. Intersex people are people who are born outside of the female-male binary. It means that people are usually born with XX chromosomes or XY chromosomes. An intersex person could have XXY chromosomes, or an intersex person could have a female body on the outside and have XY chromosomes. There are many variations, so that's why intersex is used as an umbrella term actually to show all these different variations that exist. Intersex used to be called hermaphrodites, but this term is stigmatizing and is not used anymore. Also, it fails to describe their nature because hermaphrodite means that someone is 50% female, 50% male, something that is impossible in the human nature. So at least almost, it's 1.7% to 2% the population that is intersex worldwide. It means it's the same as with people who have red hair. So it's a lot. Here, you can see the difference between intersex and other groups. For example, intersex has to do with the sex assigned at birth with sex characteristics, as we use sex characteristics as a ground in law when we talk about intersex. So it's strictly biological. And the difference with trans people, and when we talk about trans people, we use the ground gender identity, is that trans people are born in the binary. They're born usually females or males, but they identify in a different way. Of course, and this can sound complicated, a person can be born intersex and identify as a trans, right? Because intersex is about sex. Then how we identify and how we live in our gender is different. Also, sexual orientation is different. So, for example, an intersex person can be straight, can be gay, can be bi, can be everything, because sexual orientation has to do with who we like. So this presentation is about sex characteristics. So actually, I will very briefly talk about the findings of my book. This research was a comparative research. It was actually the first global legal study on intersex rights. And I analyzed 33 countries across the globe that had at the moment legislated or there was jurisprudence on the matter. This is a quite interesting table. So the main issue with intersex is that when they are born, doctors will perform surgeries on them and they turn them into females or males. So this is a violation to the right to bodily integrity, autonomy, etc. The United Nations has repeatedly said that this is a torture, the Council of Europe and the European Union as well. But these surgeries, they keep on happening until today. So you can see in the first column of the countries by 2019 that had legislated on the matter or had jurisprudence. In this column, the countries that have legislated are Malta and Portugal and Iceland. So until today, when I published this one, Iceland had not legislated on that, but then legislated later, and Germany legislated later. So right now we have Malta, Portugal, Germany, Iceland, and Greece since July that finally banned these surgeries. So you can see that we have very few countries banning the surgeries, even though the first demand of the intersex movement is to ban the surgeries. Many countries had legal development on the legal recognition, and this happened because of the trans issue. They had to accommodate trans people, and this is why, in many cases, they passed laws on intersex as well, or they passed laws that affect intersex. Then about marriage and family, we have some developments about anti-discrimination as well. So the main problem is that, first of all, the legislator is not banning surgeries, even though it is an issue. And another issue is that even when we have laws, it doesn't mean that these laws are good. For example, the Portuguese law is not a good practice, it's quite problematic, and it also does not criminalize these acts. So they ban the surgeries, but doctors who keep on performing these surgeries are not criminalized for their acts. And this is also a problem. So now I'm going to pass into practice and let you know what happened in Greece. So in Greece in July, we passed the law 4958, Article 17 to 20, where the surgeries and hormonal treatments on intersex infants and children who are under the age of 15 are banned. So to be able to do such an operation, you will need the decision of an interdisciplinary committee. Also, this decision will have to be approved by the court. And then such a surgery can happen. Otherwise, it's banned. The doctors who perform this surgery are criminalized, which was really important in this law. This is Article 20. This, I have to say that this is a work of many years. Actually, it didn't happen in one day. In 2017, the previous government, who was a socialist government, had passed a law on translegal recognition. So when I was writing my PhD, I was analyzing this law, and what I saw, and it was quite interesting, is that there was Article 2 talking about sex characteristics, and then the rest of the law was just about trans. And I was wondering what's happening. So I searched at the drafts of this law, and I found that there was an article, Article 7 on intersex. But when the draft left the preparatory committee and went to the ministry, then in the ministry, they deleted Article 7. So it reached the parliament without it. So right now, in 2022, we passed this law with a conservative government. And this happened actually because there was a strategy. We were forced by the EU to have this strategy on LGBT rights. It was also a coincidence and the lack that in the committee for this strategy, there were two of my supervisors of my PhD, so they knew the issue already. We submitted as Intersex Greece a report to them, and we started telling them which is the issue. So in the document of the strategy, they had one page about surgeries. This has never happened before. So then the government contacted us, telling us that they want to pass a law. We started working with them for many months. The Greek law is actually a mix of the Maltese and German law. And I believe that a big success of the law is that intersex activists were included throughout the process. So even details matter in this law. For example, they use the right terms as approved by the intersex movement in Greece, because many times there may be a law, but the terms are keep on being stigmatizing. So here you see two pictures. There is one picture from Intersex Greece. This was the first community meeting we held last year, and this is the Intersex pre-conference in Bulgaria. Everyone is happy with the law. And you can see people from all the European intersex organizations. I have to say that we had a lot of help from the European movement and as well from the American movement, because they gave us the know-how and they support us in every step. Also, the communication process was quite interesting. We had to talk with the media. We had to inform people about what it is, why the law was reaching the parliament. And also in Greece, when the bill is reaching the parliament, there is a public consultation, which is online. So for 2 weeks that the platform was open, we were really stressed that maybe doctors would start sending negative comments about the law, and this wouldn't have a good impact. But fortunately, we received some comments, but they were not negative. And this was also a quite positive development in passing the law. So to wrap up, what happens now? We're about to publish as Intersex Greece a report on hate speech against intersex people in Greece, where we asked families of intersex people and intersex people about hate speech incidents against them and how this is linked to the law. This is linked because this report shows the social attitudes, actually, and this is the social legal aspect of the whole situation. So first of all, based on this report, negative attitudes against intersex prevail in the Greek society. Intersex people do not know that there is a law on the ban, and they do not know that there are also other laws about intersex. For example, on hate speech, the ground sex characteristics was added in 2017. They do not know that. Medical practitioners, legal experts, and judges do not know that there is a law. So the first training for judges happened in July, where we trained judges about intersex, and they had never heard before what intersex or sex characteristics is. Doctors, some of them now know about the law, but they're really scared because there is also the criminalization of their acts. So they are very scared at the moment. They're trying to reach out to us for information. And of course, yes, we solved the issue of the surgeries, but we haven't solved other issues like the social attitudes, hate speech, abortions. For example, when gynecologists see that a woman will give birth to an intersex child because they can see it through certain tests, they advise abortion, even though there's no risk for the health of the child when it's born. So the huge challenge right now is to inform, first of all, everyone about this law, because we risk of having a law which will be problematic in the implementation. So then in practice, you will still have nothing. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicoleta. And well, last but not least, we have Professor Barbara with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, each and all of you. First of all, the Institute for organizing such an opportunity. And I should unmute myself, maybe. Yes, can you hear me? Yeah. Yes, or should I also? So let's start from the beginning, from scratch. Thank you very, very much to the Institute for organizing this opportunity to link also with the local community, which is very important, and to Professor Frerichs for being here, to my students to be here after such intense classes in the morning. And, and I would like to start with an image which has apparently nothing to do with intersectionality and the topic that I would like to present today, which is not really my research, but an output, a common output of my research in the last year, which is trying to change the look that we have a phenomenon. And this is what is called a dual image, an ambiguous image, where if you pay attention, you can look and see two images. So depending on how we look, we can see to a sort of Indian person whose profile is here, the nose, the eye, the mouth, and an Eskimo from the back. So intersectionality basically is a way to look differently at discriminations, at violence, and at experiences of subordination. And this work with intersectionality has engaged myself for the last, let's say, 15 years, because I started as a trainer to work with that in non-formal education, and then I started to research on it. Where we are now, intersectionality, as it is well known, the term is a brainchild of Black feminism, and the term was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, an activist, a Black feminist activist and a scholar, who tried to make visible the invisibility of Black women's rights. Today, we can see that, intersectionality has traveled across continents, contexts, times, and disciplines. But what we can say is the inheritance of the thought is to move an anti-formalistic critique to law and policy, to overcome the sameness and difference principle in law, which is based on formal equality, and to deconstruct essentialistic views about groups. So to look at minorities within groups and different power relation and hierarchy. Why it is important to speak about intersectionality today? Because the risk is that it's like a catch-all word, a buzzword. Within the EU, the Horizon program is now making it a point of innovation to get funding, and there is the need to use it consciously. Otherwise, it's just a term that we use, but without knowing how to use it. A risk to use intersectionality in a depoliticized way is that it can miss its transformative aim, which is at the core of the philosophical background and aim of intersectionality. So, coming to today, one question that we try to approach in a special issue that was just issued 3 days ago, and I'm very happy to present here, is the question, okay, we get somehow what intersectionality is, but how can we do it in practice, in law, in policy, in research, in different disciplinary fields? Which kind of methods can we use? And so we launched a call, and I'm also very happy to introduce you to this journal, which is about gender, International Journal of Gender Studies. I mean, it's free access, so it's not a marketing opportunity, and we're very proud that the contents are accessible to anyone. And we launched the call asking to worldwide, to scholars and even activists, how can we do intersectionality in both explored and unexplored places? Places where we have a long tradition to apply intersectionality, and places where, disciplines like statistics, where intersectionality has not really been integrated. And I'm very happy to see that one of the co-editors, Pablo, is connected, and maybe I would also like to leave the word to him. We were 4 co-editors, Pablo, Laura Scudieri, Nina Licke, and we had 1 year collecting all papers, and we received more than 40 articles. So we decided to collect about 20 articles in this journal. And now we're starting a second phase of the project with an edited book, which will be in 2023. So we will have more fun next year. And if Pablo,
I'm here.
oh, nice to see you. Now that the issue is out, we can relax.
Great to see you, all of you.
We can't hear you very well, I think. Oh.
Are you listening to me?
No. Okay, we can hear you.
Okay. No, I really only want to say that it was really a big pleasure work with you, Laura and Nina. It was a really hard work, but at the end, I really hope that this issue will be useful for all of you during the master and for your work. I think that I only want to say 2 words. I mean that the importance of this issue is learn to take it seriously, the term intersectionality, which means learning to do intersectionality. I mean, stop to using the word, but only the word, and start to using the methodologies to take advantage of the epistemological and political consequence that the intersectionality have. As Barbara just said, learning to capture the complexity of identities in the tension between the oppression and resistance, to leave some space of agency for the people who live in terrible system of oppression, exclusion, and marginalization. Then I hope that we hope that this issue will be really useful for the people to using. For example, I learned before that some about the Colombia and the problem of desplazados, displaced people. This could be really useful to learn about the methodologies in order to make a better research as you will be when you will be during the thesis and so on. Then thank you very much for the moment, and Barbara, thank you too because Barbara is wonderful, I have to say, and was really nice and beautiful work with her. Barbara, I guess you have to go to pick up my daughter at the volleyball, but I kiss you. Bye.
Maybe, and that, I mean, as Crenshaw and Carbado says, there are still another place where we can really look for gaps in law and in visibility of rights, and this is where we tried to invite our contributors to go. So we had 17 thematic articles that we summarized through some guidelines. For example, practices of intersectionality in institutional settings and movements. So really grassroots movement, and how the institutionalization of intersectionality is risking to, depoliticize it by reappropriating the term. So this was one focus that we looked at. Another one was epistemology. So methodology, epistemology, and political practices. Then we reflected on how difficult it is to make the law working in an intersectional way, which could seem a paradox, because I mean it's where everything started, at least by explicitly naming intersectionality, but as it was told, law works through categories, and somehow it is difficult. It is a rigid tool that we can use and adapt to the rights of people, to the claims of people. And finally, some contribution dealt with bodies and what are perceived as deviant bodies respect to what is assumed to be normal bodies. So I really invite you to have a look, and hopefully it will help also for the thesis and the pieces of research that will be developed. We also invite, I say the we, not as a majestic, but as a co-editors and member of the journal. You can publish in Spanish, in Italian, and in English, and we would really love to receive your papers and outcomes of your research, because the idea is really to bring scholars and activists together to deal with gender-related issues and sex-related issues. So thank you very much for this space.
No, thank you very much to all our presenters today. We saw many different teams that they all were together within the same issue of gender. We found how human rights and the practice of human rights has to have a gender perspective to truly make a difference for women. We find or we analyze the lack or the different access to justice that we have between genders, and of course we shed some lines on the theme the issue of the intersex people, no, and of course we close with Barbara and intersectionality, which can cover all of this, no, from internally displaced people to intersex people to people who live in vulnerability situations, in favelas, etc. So we kind of ran out of time for the questions and comments, but if somebody of people who are online or through the chat, if somebody has a question or a comment, feel free to ask, and I'm sure the presenters will be very glad to answer it very quickly. If not, if there is no comment or questions, then once again, thank you so much to you all for being here today. And those who are in person, we can talk outside of the classroom if you want to. And to more than 40 people that were here online, thank you so much for being here. And this will be recorded and it will be put on the YouTube channel of the Oñati community. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you to you, Doria.